Welcome to the podcast Women Ending War with me, Dr. Elana Sztokman, a Jewish American Israeli feminist author and anthropologist, and my co-host Eva Dalak, a Muslim-Palestinian citizen of Israel, world-renowned expert in conflict transformation and peace activator. Together, we are here to demonstrate that there is another path, that peace is possible, and that women must lead the way. We are on a journey to activate peace. Thank you for being here with us. אז שלום.
Salam alaikum.
Shalom aleichem, alaich. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Nice to see you, Eva. How are you today?
I'm good. Nice to see you too. Happy to be here.
Happy to be here with you as well.
Yeah, excited about this conversation.
Likewise, even though we're in these crazy times.
Especially because we're in this crazy time.
Every time we think that oh, how much crazier can it get? It gets crazier and new layers of insanity and violence and war and new fronts of, conflict emerging. So
yeah, and as we say in crisis, there's always danger and opportunity, and I think we're on the verge of big opportunities, even though it seems crazy to say that, but I really believe in being centered in the eye of the storm. And right now we're in deep storms.
Opportunity.
Yes.
I like the optimism. Let's say we're in times of opportunity. That's excellent. Yeah. Okay, so today we have a guest who I'm really excited about, someone who I've been following for a while, and it's really nice to see you in person. We're here with attorney Nava Rosolyo. Am I saying your name right? Rosolyo?
Yeah, Rosolyo.
Nava is a prominent leader in the campaign to replace the Israeli government in the protest movement. Inshallah, God willing. Bezat Hashem. She is the founder of the Shame Brigade.
Shame Brigades.
The Mishmeret HaBusha and the Rumblers Movement, the Maridim. Maridim?
Yeah, in Hebrew it's called Maridim.
Maridim. Can you just tell us a little bit about those two groups that you founded?
Yeah, so Shame Brigades, as I call it in Hebrew, Mishmorot HaBusha, we take our protest in front of every coalition member, Netanyahu's coalition member. It's direct public pressure on the partners of Netanyahu's extreme and irresponsible government. We say to their face, you are partners of destroying Israel. How can you do that? How can you live with yourself? The demonstrations are not taking place only in Kaplan or in Jerusalem. We can bring them to their face. Mm-hmm. We want them to hear us, the public. They're public servants and they need to hear us. So in my Shame Brigades, it's not just mine, it's mine and the entire public. They get to hear the public criticism on their irresponsibility.
What concerns you about this government?
So ever since Netanyahu's government was first elected, we were very concerned because they declared from the very first moment that they want to weaken the Israeli legal system. They don't want a strong and independent legal system, probably because they want to commit crimes. As we call Netanyahu our prime minister, we call him the crime minister. He is personally dealing with 3 severe criminal charges, and he partnered with very extreme partners such as Smotrich and Ben-Gvir, which they have their own crimes that they want to commit. Maybe the occupation and maybe harming civil rights, especially minorities' rights, and even specifically Arab citizens' rights. And we were warned, not only us, the public, but the officials in the legal system and the security system, and even officials at the White House, and even President Joe Biden himself, warned Netanyahu that he's going too far, and this is going to harm the national security, Israel national security.
He's been called to the Hague, and he's, many countries in Europe are already calling him looking to arrest him for crimes. I mean, That's happening internationally. I mean, it doesn't seem to affect him that much. He doesn't seem to be bothered by it.
International arrest warrants are just waiting for him. It's probably a matter of a few days that he's going to be charged as, I'm so ashamed to say that, but the Israeli prime minister is going to be charged with war crimes.
War crimes. So,
and everyone warned Netanyahu. All bells were ringed. And he just ignored them, conveniently ignored them. Yeah. And we say that it's going to harm the national security, and it happened.
I feel like we're all being controlled by his most extreme elements, because every time, there's an opportunity to, let's say, call for a ceasefire, every time there's an opportunity for a deal, ceasefire, get the hostages back, or, a whole bunch of other things, he always caves to the most extreme elements. Ben Gvir will come and say, well, if you call a ceasefire, then I'm going to leave the government. And then Netanyahu caves and says, okay, we're not going to do a ceasefire. So that keeps happening over and over again. So we are all being held hostage to a certain degree by Ben Gvir.
It's very symbolic. We have the Israeli hostages, but we also, as a nation, we're hostages by our own government, Netanyahu's government.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure who is controlling who, Netanyahu and Smotrich and Ben Gvir and the other very extreme and dangerous partners.
Like Orit Strok, right? Orit Strok also, she's an extremist, and she has declared this government... Messianic, total. And she has said, this government is like a dream come true. She said it's like paradise or something like that. She's like, all of our dreams are coming true.
She said it's we're in days of miracles happening. After October 7th, after the terrible slaughter, above 1,500 Israelis were butchered by the Hamas, and she called it as we talked about opportunity. She said it's an opportunity to occupy back Gaza, and even now they want to occupy the South Lebanon. That's just crazy.
Mm-hmm. I know. I saw your post about that. Was the first place that I saw about the reoccupation, the idea of reoccupying Gaza was on your Twitter, on your X post. By the way, anybody listening to this should, if you're on Twitter or X, you should absolutely follow Nava. I'm just giving you a little plug, because first of all, Nava posts really important information and also gives this very clear voice and clear explanation about why everything that's happening is so, terrifying, really. So you recently posted about how there's this whole plan to have this Jewish Israeli retake-over of Gaza, and now Lebanon. Today is the first time that I'm hearing about Lebanon also, and it's just it's like unbelievably alarming that this is what's happening. And the announcement about it said we're going to have Knesset members and we're going to have leaders, and it's like, oh my God, okay. Yeah.
You can't say in one voice that we're protecting ourselves, and then you have people like Orit Strok and Smotrich and Ben Gvir, which turned it into a religious war.
Yeah.
It's a messianic order to reoccupy the entire, the whole Israel. Is Eretz Israel Shlema, which includes the Gaza Strip, the occupied territories at the center of Israel, Gaza. And some of them believe that we need to occupy Lebanon and even Syria. Maybe even Jordan. I don't know what's the map they vision.
The big vision.
But it's like they've become empowered. They've become enabled by this government. Like this government is basically giving power to the most extreme ideas and most extreme elements
that exist. I think I'm really fascinated by this discussion, and thank you for all the work that you're doing and bringing awareness to this other part of the Israeli public that I think is not really known outside. And I think that's why this conversation is really important, because very often we're putting, and I think that's kind of my own struggle, is we shouldn't be putting people in one camp versus another camp. There's so many different layers and different perspective and different narrative within the same camp. And that it's important that we're not like referring to Israeli as one block or referring to Palestinian as one block. So that's one. And second, I think like the opportunity is really about seeing, this is, as I often say, this is a reflection of internal reality. like we're talking about Bibi and Ben Gvir or Reed or all these people as they are the villain and we are the victim and we need a savior. And the savior would be the international community with this war crime warrant. But I think that there's really a call, and that's where I see the opportunity, is a call of like reflecting on the essence and the basis and the foundation of the creation of Israel and how it happened. And I feel like a lot of the Palestinian street feeling is like, oh, this is a reproduction of what happened already in 1948 in the Nakba. And now it's just like, it's continuing, even the betrayal that is happening amongst Palestinian or among the Arab countries, be it Lebanon, Iran, and Palestine, is really about like, how can we have a united front? But there's no united front, whether with the Arab or with the Israeli or with the Jewish. And I think it's really important to consider how we are connecting on our humanity. It's not about Palestine and Israel. It's not about bringing in one messianic message, whether it's Jewish or Palestinian. I think it's really understanding that we are fighting forces of evils. And these forces are really aiming to target us as human and dehumanize whether you're Palestinian, you're Lebanese, you're Jewish, and making it as if we have two camps fighting each other and that one side will win with violence. And ultimately, violence is never the answer. And I think when we see the history repeats itself. And when an empire, because that's what Israel is considered right now, when an empire reaches its peak, the only way is down.
So I think that's really interesting what you're raising here about the issues of how different groups are perceived. I mean, and the dehumanization. I think one of the things that this government is working very hard to do is to dehumanize certain groups, whether it's the protesters, who Ben Gvir targets very specifically, or whether it's leftists in general, or, anybody. There was a girl in Beersheba recently, a little girl in Beersheba who just said, there are people in Gaza who are innocent, and she was, bullied, and she was expelled from school.
She was expelled just because she said, you should remember, people in Gaza also suffer.
And she was expelled and bullied. And exactly. Wow. And so I feel like that is also a big piece of what this government is enabling in the field, on the ground, and the dehumanization, and the dehumanization has now gotten legal backing, right? With the sort of the Ben Gvir government, and now you have stories about that. There was a school principal who was fired also because she also said what is happening with the people in Gaza without saying, and so. It's for me, I come from the world of anthropology, and so I'm always looking at language and cultural processes, and that's what's most interesting to me. I mean, all this is interesting to me, okay, but I'm just saying that's where my that's the lens that I often use. So I'm always looking at the connections between cultural processes, language, and political processes. And one of the things that's scariest to me is how connected these things are, as the process of dehumanization and the use of the legal system to legalize, how to make certain people less human, less deserving of rights, I
mean, that's the essence in every conflict. If you look at the genocide in Rwanda, that's what happened. We dehumanize the Hutu so that when the Tutsi kill them, then it's fine. And I think that's what's happened here. That's why people in Israel have a hard time to relate to what's happening in Gaza, and that we have 43,000 people that were massacred, and this being put aside and focusing only on the hostages. And I think that there's this narrative, this parallel narrative that cannot meet. And I think that's part of the work that we're doing. It's like there's a field beyond right doing and wrongdoing. And that field, we all have the right to exist and be seen and live. And somehow in this fight for democracy, we negate the essence and the existence of the other. And I think that's really interesting because a lot of the narrative are not shared. These are narratives that are within the Palestinian community, and then there's narrative within the Israeli communities, but that they never meet. And so I think in the meeting of this narrative, not in comparison, in the meeting, meaning that each of this narrative is valid in its own, and it doesn't need to compete or compare with the other narrative.
I believe that most of the Israeli people believe that the two narratives are not different narratives and they can meet. We do share the same basic values, the Israeli people and the Palestinians. We all want to live insecurity. We all want a strong legal system that would
Protect us.
Exactly.
Freedom, independence, basic rights, justice.
Actually, these are the basic values of the Declaration of Independence, which was the base to Israel. When Israel was founded, these were the basic values. And actually, I brought it as a gift if you're willing to accept it.
Thank you.
This is the Declaration of Independence.
With the ribbon.
With the hostages ribbon, the yellow ribbon, which symbolizes our struggle to bring them home.
See how beautiful this is?
And October 7th, 2023.
So for me, this is a beautiful gesture.
For me, this is a trigger.
We can speak about it.
And I'll speak about it because for
the
me,
basic values of the Declaration of Independence are liberty, freedom, equality, and striving for peace. We can't say peace because it's not on the table yet, but we're striving for peace.
Yeah, and I think for me it's a trigger because I grew up in Jaffa. I was born in Israel, and my mom was born in the 5th of May, 1948. Her whole family was fleeing from Jaffa towards Gaza, and then Israel was declared, and so her family stayed in Gaza. The family of my father stayed in Jordan and in Nablus, and the family of my mom and dad stayed in Israel, and that's how we got the Israeli nationality. And so for me, I've always wondered, independence from who? When you have a local population here, Palestinian, that were not necessarily taken into consideration. I think Arab and Jews used to live in peace prior to the mandate, and there was local population that were Jewish as well. And I think what happened is that there's kind of not only dehumanization, is separation and negation of the existence of the Palestinian people at that time. And so for me, when you give me 7th of October, bring them home, and the Declaration of Independence of Israel that promote peace and justice and freedom for the Jewish people. Me, as a Palestinian citizen of Israel, that's not the value that I receive from the state. And so that's not the value.
It's for certain people.
It's for certain people. It's apartheid. Exactly. And it's really, and that's where I feel like there's a lack of honesty on the Israeli public towards the Palestinian, towards what's been happening. I think what happened on October 7th is just bringing the issue of the Palestinian as such to the living room of the Israeli. If October 7th didn't happen, we've been under occupation for 75 years. Nobody cared. There has been like some peace activism and a lot of movement, peace movement, but that didn't deal with the root causes of the conflict. And the root causes of the conflict is actually the negation of the existence of the Palestinian people. And I think unless we're able, and that's where I say, yes, the narrative can meet, but they can meet if we can acknowledge them in their totality for the Israeli and for the Palestinian. And I think up until now, we're not acknowledging these narratives.
So when you talked earlier about an opportunity, I think, I know it can be triggering because when we say peace, it's almost like poking people in the eye because there is no peace and there is no equality. But when you talked earlier about opportunities, I think after October 7th, we must speak about the elephant in the room. We can't continue living in this crazy reality because there is no security, not for the Israeli people, not for the Palestinians, and we must find a way to solve this very complex situation. We can't continue with the endless rounds of striking Gaza, and then we have some peace or quiet, and again, this won't work for the long run. We need to find a solution that we can all live with for the long run, and all people deserve basic rights, human rights. I believe that Netanyahu's government, their goal initially was to weaken the legal system and to control the legal system because they want to commit more crimes. They don't want Arab people to have rights. They don't want even Israeli people to have rights, such as protesting.
Right.
And we fight for the same thing. We need a very strong and independent legal system to protect all of us, not just our rights, our Israeli, Jewish rights, also Palestinian lives. And we, as I personally see it, we need to find a solution that would work in the long run. I don't know if that's separation, complete separation. I don't know how you see it. I believe that we should find a way to separate Gaza Strip and the Israeli territory. And we can find a way to draw the line between those two. I personally think a land is not holy. I don't mind bringing back lands that you believe that they were Palestinian lands. Land is not holy as I see it. I think life is the holy thing.
Yes. So Nava, so that's really interesting. So you were telling me before we started about where you come from also and how you come to this. You said you come from a religious family, right, where the beliefs are that land is holy. I also come from the religious world. I also was brought up on all those ideas. How did you come to be in this place of the protester and the Shame Brigade and
Meridim? Meridim is a specific movement that says Netanyahu is the prime minister and the protests take place in front of his official residence in
my friend Chaviva goes every Saturday night. Every Saturday night she's in Kisar.
He's just a symbol of everything that's wrong in here. So Meridim is specific demonstrations that's towards Netanyahu, the Israeli prime minister. And for my personal story, I grew up in a religious family in Jerusalem. They have traditionally voted for Netanyahu's governments, which is, I think, he was a prime minister for the past 15 years or so.
Most of the last 20, something like that, more,
So most of them still support him. I wonder, not just about my family, but all of Netanyahu's and his government supporters. Can't you see that he has led Israel to such a terrible shape? That he damaged everything, the national security, the economy, the society. He torn us apart. How can you still support him? And Netanyahu has propaganda channels. I'm sure you heard about
Channel 14.
Channel 14.
I've been on Channel 14 a couple of times. I used to be chair of the Democrats abroad in Israel, the Democratic Party, and I was head of media. I was vice chair for media there, and so I would do all these media spots. And I've been to Channel 14. It is wow! It is like you're in a whole different world. It is just
that's an alternative world, alternative reality, alternative facts. So they are just, as I see it, they're brainwashed. They hear lies and propaganda all day. So they just believe that Netanyahu is fighting everyone, fighting Joe Biden, President Joe Biden.
It's so interesting you talk about propaganda.
And the Arab people, and the vicious legal system, and the vicious protesters, the Israeli protesters. That's crazy, but that's their narrative.
Do you know, I just want to tell you this one story that I had this exchange on social media where I was talking about what's going on in Gaza. And, there was a story about babies, the babies being killed. And it's just, I can't. So I posted about something about babies being killed. And somebody, a religious friend, wrote, "You're just listening to propaganda. You're just listening to anti-Israel propaganda because the anti-Israel propaganda is the one that says that the IDF is killing babies." So she was like, "You're listening. Your propaganda says that this is what's happening." And I said, "You're the one who's listening to propaganda that says that we don't." We had this exchange about who's listening to propaganda and it was crazy. And once you're in this world of trying to figure out who's marketing and lies and who is it? It's you can't even have a conversation anymore. I mean, this is very Trumpy, okay? Donald Trump has wait, this is the reality. He really has helped Netanyahu in so many ways because Trump has normalized all of this crazy making, gaslighting stuff. And this is part of it is that once you start trafficking in nonstop lies, then even just the process of trying to insist on truth is like people like, oh well,
There is
forget
no
it.
way out.
No, but for me,
it's a trap.
what is a little bit funny is that you would talk about the propaganda of Netanyahu when, for me, from my perspective as a Palestinian, is like the propaganda started already with the creation of Israel, with the 7 myth of the creation of Israel that was actually written by Simcha Flapan, where he said that what enabled the creation of Israel is one lie, that there's no Palestinian people, and this is a land for people without land and in a land without people. And then there's several, there's so many myths. And for me, that's why I keep referring to it as the Truman Show. We are in a show in Israel, and it's not just since 15 years ago with Netanyahu. It's been like this ever since Israel was created, because they had to enable the creation and the galvanization of all the Jewish people from various places in the world to come and create these states on the land of people that were kicked out, killed, and the genocide is just continuing. And so it's interesting spots of truth that are being taken and expanded, and then spots that are being ignored. And so for me, I think, and that's again, I go back to the opportunity, is like we're right now in kind of a war of information. We've been formed to believe certain truth, and based on our consciousness level and level of comfort, we'll be able to tackle and fight certain truths, and certain truths will keep on the side. And I think the opportunity here, and again, I go back to this, our beautiful field of Rumi, is that we need to step above this separation and narrative of you're Jewish, you're Palestinian, you're not Christian or whatever, and understand that as humanity, we are being invited to raise our consciousness and also to understand this, what's happening on a patriarchal level. And I really want to bring that here, because as 3 women discussing this, it's really important that we see that this is a testosterone
Totally.
violent conflict.
Totally.
From whether it's Hamas or Bibi or whoever.
It's wasach. I write about this a lot, that all of this stuff is wasach. They're all like showing off their wasach. All of that is wasach.
And even if there are certain women that are supporting this, they're supporting it within a structure of oppression. And unless we're able to come out of this structure of oppression and understand that what we're calling for, and I've been like working a lot this past couple of weeks on trauma-informed approach with Israeli organization in Hebrew and with Palestinian organization in Arabic. And what came out from both this workshop is like how traumatized we all are, and how from this trauma perspective, we're enabled to hear another narrative, because we're so much in our pain that the pain of the other seems limited or not relevant, because we're drowning in our own pain. And I think the key here is understanding that what we're all longing for is really more softness and more grace and femininity. And when we look at this from like a different, when we look at it from a different perspective of like the masculine and the feminine, and the land being the feminine, and the abuse that is being done in the name of this land, we're killing each other. And
I'm sorry for laughing. I'm laughing only because like I don't really buy into like a lot of the masculinity, femininity things. And if my son heard that description, he would like really get angry at me, because he thinks that when I say things like that I'm like man hating, and then like men. Anyways, I know, but it's not right. It's not men and women. When you, we've had this conversation a few times. It's not men and women. It's equality.
Too much.
It's energy. It's the energy. The feminine energy.
That's the thing. Militarism, and we need to conquer, and we need to fight them, and it's just too militarism, which makes us forget our values and the kedushat hachaim, the sacredness, sanctity of life. Exactly, and that's supposed to be the thing that is leading even the IDF, the Israeli Defense Force. That's the basic. Supposed to be the basic value of the Israeli Defense Force, and I think all of us,
that's also a myth. The idea, I get in this argument with people all the time, like, we're the greatest, most ethical army in the world, and I'm like, we are not. We're not.
And also, just to say, Israeli Defense Ministry.
But we cannot complete with that. We want to make the Israeli army back moral, and it's not weakness being moral. It's not weak. It's not means that we won't win. Whatever meaning means. Netanyahu said we need to pursue to the final victory.
Whatever that means. Is that a thing? Is there
total victory? Sorry. Final victory is something else.
But total victory is also a myth. It's just language. It's just paka paka. It's just words that he uses to avoid responsibility, to avoid accountability, to be able to keep us in war indefinitely, and to let it, and to justify all the terrible things that we're doing.
But his followers buy it.
I know.
And this is because they're brainwashed, because they hear it all day and they don't hear other voices. They only hear his horns. And that's crazy, because these people eventually get to the street and they can be violent and they say, Rak Bibi, only Bibi.
Oh yeah, there was another clip of that reporter. There was a reporter trying to report on something in this group of kids.
They just took the mic. She was a reporter. They took their mic and say, Rak Bibi, Rak Bibi.
And they're screaming at her, and they're like no respect at all for her as a human being, and that was really alarming.
As a woman,
I saw that.
They just.
I think I saw that on your post. Did you post that?
Yeah.
I saw that. So what is your vision? What do you want? So you want to replace the government, and then what would you like to see happen?
So we started with my roots. I grew up in a religious family, but I think at age of 16, it took me a few years to leave the. I would make a break here. איך אומרים לחזור בשאלה?
Come back in question.
To become not religious.
There's
no good
secular.
translation. To become not
Okay.
Secular.
So it's
So we were speaking about my family and my roots. So I was religious until the age of 16, although it took me a few years to ask questions and to ask myself why am I religious? And this is the way I was born, but why? Am I still choosing that? And it took me a few years to ask and to decide that I shouldn't be punished as I saw it, to have less free day at a week, so, Shabbat, sabbatical day. So I decided to stop. It took me a few years. I think when I got to the age of 21, when I was very hectic with my studies. I studied law and accounting at the Hebrew University.
Oh, heavy load.
In Jerusalem. Yeah. It was. I was super busy, and I said, I can't continue with not being able to open the computer on Shabbat. So I decided eventually that I need to just stop being religious, and I didn't see a good enough reason to continue that. And that's true about everything in my life. I need to ask myself, this is the reality that they say, this is the reality, accept it. And I shouldn't accept anything as a given fact. I need to ask myself, do I agree with that? Do I choose that? And even things that I chose before, I need to re-ask myself every day, do I really believe it? Do I really stand behind it? And that's true also about supporting Netanyahu's government. My family traditionally, all of the years, supported Netanyahu's government. So I thought, okay, I guess I should support him too. And I wasn't asking questions. Is this do I believe this man? He's supposed to be a leader. He has a lot of power in his hands. Do I believe him? Is he serving our interest, the Israeli interest, the entire country interest? Of course, all of the people that live in this very good land, I believe it still can be a good land. And I think when the Balfour protests start, I started being an activist.
You mean the Balfour protests?
Yeah, I think it was in 2020. Mm-hmm. I just started watching more news, reading more, hearing more, asking questions. When I started asking questions, I understood this is wrong. And it took me a lot of time to understand that. I was, I think, in my first 30s when I started asking questions about the leadership of Israel. And I understood, it's not a leadership. They just hold the power. It's not that doesn't mean being a leader. Being a leader is taking your people to a better place and to taking care of them. Right. And he didn't care about. He still don't care about.
So what would you like to see happen now? What is your ideal turn of events now?
Ideally, to replace Netanyahu's extreme government. Really, they're hurting everything. In a new responsible leadership, which doesn't shame to say we have values ahead of us. This is what's leading us. The values, I believe, the values of the Declaration of Independence should be what's lighting our way. Equality, striving for peace, liberty to the entire people, freedom for everyone. And I'm not sure what's the right solution. How can we divide two countries, or maybe your solution is one country for the entire people?
There are lots of solutions.
There are lots of solutions.
We belong to a coalition called the Forum 1325 Forum, which is in the spirit of the UN Security Council Resolution 1325, and our forum has at least 4 different solutions that are available. And, there are lots of different groups promoting different solutions. We interviewed this woman from the OLMEP organization. That's a coalition of 164 organizations that are working on solutions. Amazing. Naveen Sanduka, she was amazing. That was episode 9 in season 1. Amazing. So there are lots of solutions out there. It's just that we won't hear about them. We'll hear Bibi say this is a war of no choice. He always uses that expression. This is no choice. Even a lot of the idea, there's no choice. There are lots of choices. It doesn't even matter to a certain extent which one you believe in more or less. I have sympathies for different solutions. It doesn't even matter which one I believe in. It's the point is to understand that there are lots of other options out there. Yeah.
As I see it, my idea is to divide the Israeli country and Palestinian country into 2 separate countries. As I said, I don't think a land is holy. I don't mind divide the
Yeah. We also interviewed, by the way, Dr. Rula Hardal. She's a co-facilitator, co-director of Land for All. And their solution is a 2-state solution, like you described. But with open borders. Yeah, with open borders. So that
there's lots of technicalities around the solution. I think for me, from the beginning, there's the main issue here that we are not dealing with is the psychological root of the conflict. I don't think that the solution are there. There's no blockage around solution. There's an infinite potential of solution. But I think the humanization and understanding that we have a situation here where there are claims on the same land as one land. And even if you say that this land is not holy and you're willing to share, if you ask people, like there's Palestinian refugees since 1948 that have been rejected any attempt to be included in any of the peace solution. And so when we talk about let's create a situation where we're accepting back all the refugees that were kicked out of the land, in parallel to Jewish refugee that came back from Europe and settled in those lands. So it's very complex, and I think the only way that we can handle it is really open up an open discussion of what do you really want? What do we want beyond our position? What is our real interest? And most of our interest is to live in peace and freedom and security. Yes. And if we focus on this common ground, that is the refugee included, all these Palestinian refugees that are all around the world, that if they have the right to return, which was declared already in 1948 and has been rejected constantly by Israel, if they have the right to return, it has to be taken into consideration.
Because Israelis are scared of the so-called demographic problem. I have this argument all the time.
Because Israel imposed its demography. Right. Originally, the Jewish were 20% of the Palestinian population, and now it's the other way around. It's 20%.
One of the things that I really want to do is have a real conversation about this so-called demographic problem. Because if we're saying that we need certain people to not have rights so that they won't be a majority, we need to be thinking differently, because that's cheating. That's cheating democracy. That's basically saying, okay, we're not going to count you because we don't want you to count, because we want to still. You have to, we need a different way of thinking about human beings as human beings.
If we take Iran, Afghanistan, and now Israel, we have here states that have taken religion per se as the dominant factor in the way they lead. in the language that they use. I mean, Israel right now is not any different than Iran, than Afghanistan, using the language of the Messianic, the religion, the Jewish religion, the Muslim religion. It doesn't matter what religion.
They vision a religious country with the religious law, and not the law, the traditional law, the democratic law, independent courts. They want Medinat halacha, the religious orders.
Exactly. Just like Iran.
You know how crazy this is? I just want to tell you that I wrote a book about this in 2014. It's called The War on Women in Israel. And the book is about religious forces in the government that at the time were targeting women. You know, those were the days of like segregation on buses and women being sent to the back of the bus and women not being allowed to sing and women sent to,
Oh my God, I didn't even know that.
Oh, I should give you a copy of my book. Okay, it's called The War on Women in Israel. And it was all about this. It was about how a religious extremism took hold first on the ground in the public and then became legalized in certain municipalities, how certain municipalities would have all male events and all of this, even gynecological conferences would have no women. There'll be a bunch of men all talking about women's bodies and
separation between men and women in the public territory.
Right. So I wrote about this in 2014 and it's only been getting worse.
Wow,
like it's crazy that and Bibi himself is not religious. I mean, Netanyahu is not religious, and yet he
eats shrimps. When he's not wearing his kippah, he eats shrimps and
he's not religious at all. But he's
just taking the wave. He's taking the wave of.
Well, that's why I'm saying what I said earlier, that I feel like we're all subject to Ben Gvir, because Ben Gvir can pull down the government, and he does it. You know, he did a couple of, even with Lebanon, when the entire world was saying, oh yes, there's going to be some kind of, peace agreement with Lebanon, and Ben Gvir said, well, if you do that, I'm going to pull down the government, and so Bibi said, no, of course, whatever Ben Gvir said.
Please don't go, please stay in my coalition.
Yes, we're all being held hostage by Ben Gvir. Smotrich and Orit Stroke, we're all being held hostage that way. And
Netanyahu has partnered with the most extreme partners because he needed to assemble a coalition. So he partnered with not only the Haredim, the very extreme religious forces in Israel, also Ben Gvir and Smotrich and Orit Stroke and Avi Maoz, which is a very extreme, crazy religious
homophobic, like completely homophobic
and very dark and anti-women, anti-Arabs, of course. He just visioned a religious country with of course not democratic, which is the Jewish Amakbila,
parallel
to Iran.
Exactly. So are you planning on running for Knesset in the next election? Are you going to run?
That's a big question.
Is that okay that I asked?
Yeah, sure. I would be where I can affect the most, I could influence the most to make Israel better, democratic, based on the values of the Declaration of Independence. And if that means being in the Knesset, I would be honored to serve the public. But it's not a goal as itself. I devoted my life to make Israel better, and as a first step, rescue this country from Netanyahu's government, from Netanyahu, and replace the current shilton, mishtar, regime. To replace Netanyahu's regime in a leadership that we deserve. They deserve us, and make Israel better.
And end this war, the many wars.
And to end the war, of course, and to bring back the hostages as a starting point. And if the best place that I could do that is from inside the Knesset, I would be honored to. But it's not I'm not insisting on being a Knesset member. Sometimes you can do better things from outside, from civil organizations, from as a protester.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
Okay. Well, Odma, is there something else that you'd like to add to what you're saying about relating to the Palestinian situation and culture and society?
In the government, in the new government that I vision, the first solution, I think, to starting heal what's broken here is to fix the education. We need to educate the students, even the kids from the very young age. We need to be less hostile to each other, and of course between Jewish people and Arab or Palestinians, to government supporters and non-supporters. We need to be less hostile and to remember our values. It's the liberal values. I think that's the key to fixing everything. It should be starting from even kindergarten, exactly, and to fix the education system.
That's interesting. While you're listening to you, I just remembered, I don't know if you heard of the movie Israelism.
I'm not sure.
And it's an excellent documentary that show done by an American Jewish person that did a documentary about how in the States they are being brought up and brainwashed to love Israel and come here and bring this value. And I think that I grew up in the Israeli system, and so for me, very often a lot of the development aid program are like towards the education that Palestinians have. And hate speech toward Israeli, but very, very rarely people are realizing how much hate speech and how much the education in Israel is targeting Palestinian as dehumanization.
I know,
and
I
all
agree.
of the thing of like I grew up, I'm like, wow, there's no resonance between the Palestinian that this describe and this Arab Israeli, the way they refer to me, as if there's no connection between this Arab Israeli and the Palestinian family I have in Gaza or Nablus or elsewhere. And I think like also the movie When Olive Tree Weeps, that also has been an amazing insight into what's happening in the occupied territories. I think for me it's really interesting the vision that you have, and I'm wondering how you connected to what's happening right now in Gaza and the genocide that's happening right now, and how they bring back the hostage. I heard from a friend of mine that the number of the hostages keeps coming down because they're killed actually by the government. They're killed with the strike that the Israeli government is doing, and how this is being justified as attack of Hamas. And when I hear the word is the Israel Defense Army, I'm wondering if Palestine is created and Hamas is being taken as the Palestinian Defense Army, because ultimately the Israeli Defense Army was the Haganah and Etzel and the terrorist group that actually brought into being Israel. So again, I go back to being honest and really tackling the root causes of what's happening right now. And for me, Evan Ben Gvir and Netanyahu are just like the outside layer of a cancer that is in the Israeli society that hasn't been addressed. And unless we address this, and we address it honestly, deeply, to create a better structure and envision a better future for a land for all of us, whether we call it Palestine, Israel, Honolulu, doesn't really matter. What matters is that the people that are living here in peace, freedom, and justice, because a lot of the Israeli are actually living abroad. I live in Costa Rica, and there's a lot of Israeli communities that live there. These Israelis don't want to live in Israel, but they want to have Israel existing as a safe haven.
I feel like, Nava, you were saying some very similar things about the education system, about wanting to uproot that sort of the dehumanization. I mean, I also grew up in the religious system. I grew up in Brooklyn, New York, but I had a class called Zionism that, was mandatory. And a lot of the things that you talked about, we learned also, how to dehumanize it. Oh, that idea that Palestinians don't exist, the Palestinian state doesn't exist. I don't know if I've told you the story the first time that I was in a Palestinian home and they served makluba. And I thought to myself, oh, what does that mean there's a such thing as Palestinian food? I learned that there's no such thing as Palestinian culture. It was like, I'm embarrassed to tell you, okay, I know, I'm sorry, and I apologize, okay, that I bring this stuff up, but I'm just trying to validate the truth of this is that we have a big problem in the education system, especially in the religious system. I grew up in yeshiva, so, the religious Zionist.
I agree with you that the Israeli students are being maybe brainwashed through the education system, and we don't really know what's the content is. And part of it is religious brainwashing, and part of it is even racist and against Arab people. And I think only a new government which can deal with a solution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict could fix the education system. It must go together. Netanyahu's government won't fix the education system or anything for this matter, because they're the problem. They're not the solution. And you are right that they're not the problem. They're just the end of the problem. The problem is rooted way deeper than that. And regarding the other thing you said, I won't deny the terrible things that's happening in Gaza. I know people are suffer and being killed, even if they're not Hamas activists. A lot of uninvolved people are being killed in Gaza. I'm not sure if that's the definition is genocide. I'm not sure, but I won't deny what's happening in there, as I'm sure that Palestinian people won't deny the terrible attack on October 7th, and they won't agree with that Israeli people were butchered. But if we see it, as you said, as an opportunity, we must deal with the situation that we have been dragging for not just the past few years, but from decades ago. Right. And we need to find a solution that all of us could live with. And I believe, I won't talk about the technicalities, but I believe that there is a solution. Mm-hmm. Only if the government, the two leaderships want to find a solution. And Netanyahu's government, they don't want to solve anything. They just want to continue with the war, with the endless war. And Netanyahu's narrative is we need to put more military pressure in order to bring back the hostages. And of course, as we saw, military pressure only kills hostages.
Yeah. And it doesn't work.
Most of the hostages were...
And it's just so wrong.
Exactly.
It's so wrong.
And that's a lie. That's a lie. Mm-hmm. The way to bring back hostages and to stop the war is a complete deal, ceasefire with bringing back all hostages. And I think there is no point to continue with the war for no reason. If we get to a deal that includes bringing back the hostages and ceasefire in Gaza and in Lebanon, you can get everything in one package. And the only thing that is standing between us and this solution is Netanyahu's government. Netanyahu is the one, and Netanyahu and, of course, his partners. They just don't want to solve and
he's purposely sabotaging. I mean, his own people say that he sabotages every opportunity. He does what's called moving the goalposts. You know, moving the goalposts is where he says, he says certain terms and then switches the terms. And
I mean, it's all manipulation, and obviously the main reason he want to continue, because if he stops, then he's going to be in prison.
That's
true. I mean, let's just face it.
Yeah. He needs to continue with the war in order to stay in power, and that's what's causing a lot of unnecessary deaths.
It's so corrupt. It is like, okay, we have to bring this to a close. So I want to ask you a last question, which is what brings you hope?
Oh.
I heard that sigh. That was like you're dealing with all this stuff, and then
these days are really terrible. You can say that he has his coalition. He has 64 members coalition. He's the majority. So what's hope? He would stay in power for forever. But where there is struggle, there is hope. The fact that we're still on the streets and we're speaking here about optimism and replacing Netanyahu's regime, I believe that he would make himself, that Netanyahu's coalition would make himself go. He is the enemy of himself because he has gone too far. Yeah. He's damaging everything in Israel, not just security and economy, even his own voters. So I think he would show Netanyahu will show Netanyahu the way out, and then we would
have a new reality,
seize the opportunity and replace this terrible government in a new worthy government.
Maybe it's possible that because there is so much rage right now that eventually, as soon as the opportunity comes for change, that maybe we'll have an opportunity for real transformation. Maybe.
I would take that.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Nava Rosolyo, one of the leaders of the very, very important protest movement in Israel, and a really clear and powerful voice of change and transformation and belief in democracy and belief in human rights and believe in peace and believe in a different possibility, the possibility of a different future.
Better future for all of us.
You've been listening to the podcast Women Ending War. I'm Dr. Elana Sztokman, and my co-host is Eva Dalak. If you like this, Please subscribe, share, like, and comment. Links to our channels on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple are below. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Substack. And please consider supporting us financially. We need your help. Link to our GoFundMe page is below. In peace, salam, and shalom.